that the assassin. Sorry.
Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, December 17th, and Colin Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back, Colin.
Good to be with you, Nima.
Let's get started, Larry, with the situation in Syria. We had this statement from Assad talking about the situation. It seems that he was in Syria until uh, December 8th, and after the fall of Damascus, he has decided to leave Syria. And what was your understanding, your take from what he has said in that letter?
Uh, there's a part of me that the human part of me, I like to think that feels sorry for the man. I think in many respects, he was hoodwinked. He did a lot to hoodwink himself. He believed a lot of things that he shouldn't have believed. But I do think that he had genuine concern about the integrity and long lastingness, if you will, of Syria as a state. And now all of that's in question. And the cavalier disregard, apparently, that he had for his family. That's what it looks like anyway. I'm going to Russia. You guys fare for yourself. I don't know if that's the way it worked out, but that's the way it looks like it worked out. And the fact that he went to Russia rather than going to the bosom of his fellow Arab allies is a stunning thing, too, to me. I know the duplicity and conniving nature of his Arab allies, the two-facedness of them, indeed the three or four-facedness of them, having dealt with Prince Bandar in our own government. But still, that's a hell of a statement for this former Arab leader of a key Arab state to go to Russia rather than to go to the bosom of his Arab allies. It says something about the dynamics in West Asia. So I just don't know what's going to happen to him. I would say that his lifetime is probably limited, severely maybe. I don't know that that's the case, but I would think there are so many people who would probably like to eliminate him that if he comes out of Russia and goes anywhere else, he probably will be tracked down. That's sad to say. I was talking to you earlier before we went on about a political scientist that I listened to today at great length. He went on in English, Italian. He's Italian, but he went on in good English, like most Europeans, unlike most Americans speaking their language. And one of the things he said that stuck with me was that the empire, America, has moved from really the period of 9/11 to the present period in a way that's normalized bestiality in the world. And he characterized accurately that bestiality's two principal instruments as being war through proxies or directly, and sanctions. 3 billion people in the world, 3 billion people, Nemo, under our sanctions of one form or another. I just signed off on a letter asking Biden, the worst president the United States of America has had since World War II. No question about it. That's my portfolio. That's what I taught. Presidential decision making from 1945 to Obama's decision to cajole NATO into doing Libya for him. That's the period I taught. He is the worst president in that period. No question about it. He's gotten the empire in more trouble. He's normalized this bestiality. That's what he's done. Him and Blinken and Sullivan and Biden. And this is going to be a hell of a legacy because, as the scientist pointed out, the Italian pointed out, this more or less negates international criminal justice. It negates international law. Hell, it negates the United Nations and everything that we put it together for in the beginning of the 50s. It negates everything that we have worked for in the way of humanitarian law in the world and international law in the world. You can condemn all the courts as being prejudiced here, prejudiced there, all the different apparatuses as being talking shops and so forth. They nonetheless serve their purpose. As Sir Nigel Rodley said to me in Syracuse, Sicily, we bother the buggers We bother the buggers. And he meant bothering the people who foster bestiality. That's what he meant. Well, now we're taking those things away. And the empire is largely responsible for it. It's had its henchmen. It's had its henchmen all over Europe and in other places too. But principally, the West has done this, created this practice of bestiality, foreign policy, security policy through bestiality. You have to go back to the Athenians on the island of Melos to find this sort of tragic situation. That's a long time ago. And yet we've brought that back. And I think this political scientist is absolutely right.
Larry, the situation in Syria right now, how do you find the policy? It seems that the Biden administration, they have said they had more than connection with them. I don't know what does that mean, but
let me tell you what it means. I just went over the map of where the United States is in Syria. 9 different places, 3 of them principally to steal oil. One of them at this moment while we're talking, Nima, stealing oil and pumping it to Israel. That's where the United States is. We are all up and down that corridor between the southern tip where the Jordan border impacts and all the way up to where Mount Hermon and the Israelis are now celebrating their new ski resort. A friend of mine said, can you imagine how Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and others are salivating now because they are looking at settlers going onto properties that are probably valued in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per hectare. This is incredible what we have gotten our hands on now. And we are not going to turn it loose. That's where we are. And the United States is there, big time there. And it remains to be seen what Erdogan and his forces, which are aimed at least limiting the Syrian Kurds' mobility, and maybe eliminating quite a few of them, are going to do with us backing them, because we're backing them. And they're the ones affording us what external security we have, because you can't really provide a lot of internal security with that few troops and doing what they're doing. So our security is coming from our back, Jordan, and to a certain extent from Iraq, and it's coming from the Kurdish forces. And Erdogan wants to punish those forces severely. So hold on, let's see what happens. But we're there. We are there big time. And Biden's lying through his teeth if he says the only place we are is in Damascus, whomever, speaking with Jelani or whomever.
How long does it take for the United States to withdraw from the support of these new people in Syria?
We won't. We won't, not unless they turn in a way that we can't handle propaganda-wise. Then we'll turn on them. Well, the same way we turned on Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was our bud when we were in Afghanistan pushing the Soviets out. Then Al-Qaeda struck the tower and, hit the Pentagon and did a few damages to the United States. And so then they became our enemy. I'm not absolutely confident now, from all the archives and data and information I've looked at and people with whom I've talked who know what they're talking about in the intelligence community, the security community at large, I'm not sure that all of this wasn't part of a plan. Not that the plan was executed exactly according to Hoyle, but I'm not sure that, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by and large, but I am a theorist that knows, for example, that JFK was assassinated by the United States government. Rogue elements, you want to call them? Okay, well, maybe there's some mafia, maybe there's some CIA, maybe there's some military. We wait to see if it ever comes out. But I know Kennedy was assassinated. That's no conspiracy. I know he was assassinated. I know that Oswald did not shoot John F. Kennedy, period. By the same token, I know that this is too much of a tapestry. And too many things have fallen in line in support of what they call the clean break strategy, the strategy that said, let's put the Levant, let's put the Middle East and North Africa, let's put it in complete chaos, that'll protect Israel. but it'll also reestablish over time our hegemony over the region. And we won't have to worry about Persian Gulf War or anything like that anymore, or rare earth metals, whatever might be discovered. We won't have to worry about it because we'll be in charge. And that's what we've been implementing ever since that strategy became apparent to my first president in my studies was H.W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, Papa Bush. And the fairy tale or reality, I actually saw the memo he wrote it on, was when Paul Wolfowitz sent him that paper, which later became George W. Bush's, his son, Bush II's, national security strategy. He sent it back to the Pentagon with a handwritten note in the margin saying, send this back to the crazies in the basement of the Pentagon. Now, that was a proper, appropriate appraisal of that paper. But then came his son, and ever since we've been implementing that strategy. We were implementing it before on the sly, but we started officially, presidentially blessed, implementing it at that time. That strategy says we will be a primary power in the world forever and a day. The primary power in the world forever and a day. That no one must be allowed to challenge us, no matter how small, how medium-sized, how large. And that's what we're doing. And the Middle East is an important place for us to do this. Look at what we've done. We have essentially driven Russia out. And I don't blame Russia for doing that because they got a much more serious situation in Ukraine where we're also trying to bleed them to death. And Georgia and Romania, name some more places. And so getting out of the Levant, getting out of the Middle East, they can come back probably anytime they want to with regard to Iran and their defense treaty with them. But I understand why Putin is doing that. But that's a victory for us. It's a victory for us. Just like when we get Georgia to join the fight, it's going to be a victory for us. Moldova, going to be a victory for us. This is what the empire is doing. And the strategy is, with some hiccups and some perturbations, moving right along. And Syria is the latest unexpected but planned for development.
As you mentioned, we have Iran and Russia out of Syria right now, out of the Syrian equations. Right now, I'm talking about we don't know about the future.
Yeah.
But
I understand Iran's got a party there right now in Damascus talking with Jelani. I don't know that that's true, but I was reported that by a fairly reputable person. I'd be doing that if I were Iran. I'd at least send an emissary. What's your plan, my man?
It's obvious that they're trying to make some political moves on Syria to see what would be the reaction from the current people in Syria. But if we assume that Russia and Iran are out of Syria right now, the burden is on Turkey and the United States.
And Israel.
And Israel, exactly. Yeah. How do you see the future of the conflict? Do you think, it seems to me that in the future, we can have some sort of conflict between Turkey and Israel? Because that's, if they go the way that they're trying to, when you look at the policy in Israel, they're trying to capture as much as they can from Syria. Turkey has the same sort of policies, but it's somehow different, but it's the same sort of policy. And you have these people in Damascus. How, in your opinion, is there any possibility of having a conflict between Turkey and Israel? And under any set of circumstances, any set of conditions?
I'm not going to rule anything out in that regard, because I've been surprised a number of times in the past, particularly by Turkey and by Israel. But what I would say right now is it doesn't seem to be in either state's interest to come into direct conflict with the other. And I say that because if Erdogan is passing on his leadership to his foreign minister or to whomever, and if he is intent on passing on a reasonable prospect for, now I won't say recreating the Ottoman Empire, but giving it a good kick in the fanny to get started. I don't think he wants to start it at this particular moment in a very obvious way. I could be wrong. He could go after Israel tomorrow morning. By the same token, I don't think Netanyahu wants to take on that project. I think he wants as much of Syria as he can get. He's now talking about securing the Golan, and I was reading in Haaretz about what's already got. This man, Israel is just a motor machine. They've got all these people going out there with bulldozers and everything. They're already developing the land. They're already getting ready to lay foundations and build, shopping centers and highways. So he's got his hands full right now, I think, just with the extension of the Golan, having the Syrian side of the Golan Heights and a little bit beyond that for a buffer zone. But he's exploring further. So as long as no one checks him in that, and heaven be damned that the United States ever check him in anything, he's going to keep inching and inching and inching and inching and get as much of it as he can. He's going to inch over towards Jordan too, I suspect. This ceasefire that Haaretz is reporting on right now, fairly hopefully, which is unusual for these particular people writing in Haaretz to be doing right now, I think, that this ceasefire looks like almost a complete surrender by Hamas. It's not a lot of Hamas prisoners coming out of prison. It's the hostages that remain alive, or a reasonable number of them coming back. Israel stays in Gaza as the security force for an indeterminable period. If I'm reading Haaretz right about the details of this, and I think it was Smotrich who's reported in Haaretz, or Ben Gvir, or both of them, saying this will pass in the Knesset in a lightning flash. So it must be pretty conducive to Israel's interests. Syria has, in a certain way, done this. It's taken all the focus off of Gaza, even the humanitarian focus, even the brutality, bestiality focus. And I think the Gazans are looking at themselves now and saying, we have no allies. We have no friends. We have no allies. Hamas must be thinking that way too. It's a dire situation for them, really. And I think you could say with some credibility, this is the absolute end of a two-state possibility. That doesn't mean we can't go other directions, but that might be more positive. But I think it's the end. I heard someone today, maybe it was Jeffrey Sachs, I can't remember, but I listened to a number of people this morning talking about, let's just build two states and put a huge wall between them. I think we're past that. I don't think Israel would even in a minute sign up to that. And it's mainly because Netanyahu has given them this legacy of bestiality, of conquering hero, of land grabber, of bringing into being Judea, Samaria, and the greater Zionist dream, and prospects of even more. I don't think you're going to arrest that anytime soon. The one power that could, and you alluded to it, is Turkey. They could put a real fly in this map very quickly. But I don't think they're going to. I really don't. I think Erdogan, most of the time now, his mouth overloads his ability to fulfill what his mouth has uttered, or his courage doesn't overflow in order to do the things that he hints or intimates that he might do. And we can talk about him wanting an Ottoman Empire all day long and wanting to get it started and starting in Syria and all those sorts of things. He's still got to confront the United States of America and the empire. And the empire has normalized bestiality, as we said before, and will do anything to stop anyone who seems to be doing anything injurious to our little plaything in the Eastern Mediterranean called Israel. Because they're doing our bidding, Neiman. They're doing our bidding. I'm absolutely convinced now that we have this backwards when we say Israel has Biden. Biden has Israel.
Larry, do you think that from what we've seen so far, from what you know about the behavior of Turkey, is there any place in their concern about Palestine and the future of Palestinians? Do they consider Palestine in their policies right now towards Syria?
I don't think that's a term that Turkey would even recognize as being relevant if they were being honest about it. I think what they're looking at right now with regard to that region is, let's stop the brutal killing, and let's do something that resembles a ceasefire and a peace, and then let's get on. But they know that getting on is going to be giving Netanyahu largely what he wants. My big question that I keep asking myself is, what's he going to do with the residual Palestinians? I mean, he's killed, I think the death toll is probably close to 250,000 right now. So let's just say he's killed 250,000 men, women, children, you name it, in Gaza. We'll never know the names probably, unless someone really assiduously goes after it from the UN or whatever, of many of them. We'll never have the bodies recovered of many of them. They'll just be interred with the rubble. But it's amazing how fast these settlers can work to get rid of the rubble and start building. So I think we're looking at Greater Israel, and Greater Israel is ultimately going to encompass parts of Syria, maybe parts of Jordan, if not all of Jordan, and parts of Egypt, and whatever else they can grab in the next decade or so that the United States wants them to grab in order to give it a better position to continue to implement its strategy in Southwest Asia. The fly in these, or the impediment that might arise in these plans is, of course, Russia and China being very much aware of what is behind all of this. And I think Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin know who Netanyahu is operating for, on whose behalf he's operating. I'm not sure Bibi knows. I'm really not sure Bibi knows. But I think Xi Jinping and Putin know that he's operating on behalf of the empire. When they will move to check that operation is a huge question in my mind, because it cannot be conducive to Chinese long-term interests to see the United States creating such incredible chaos in Southwest Asia that by default it becomes the hegemon in that region. That's our strategy. That's our purpose. So somewhere in here, we're going to knock heads with Russia or China or both. Then Bibi will not be any help. He will be swallowed up like an ant in a whale's mouth.
Larry, how we can imagine the future of the conflict for Gazans right now? Iran is disconnected from the line between Iran and Hezbollah, doesn't exist anymore in Syria. We don't know that if Iran would do something in Syria, would make some sort of agreement. So far, we haven't heard from that. But assuming the current situation, and Gazans and the people in the West Bank, Palestinians, are, as you've mentioned, in a dire situation right now. Who's going to be concerned about these people? Arab states, Turkey?
No.
Nobody seems to care about the situation in Palestine.
Bibi is absolutely counting on that, and working on plans to revitalize the Abraham Accords and make the apples and oranges that he presents to the Arab states more conducive to their wish than saving the Palestinians. And that's not very hard to do. And I think it's similar with the Turks, although I can see that they don't have a huge concern about it because it's really not their fight. You can say, well, okay, Erdogan always wanted to be the real leader of the Islamic world and all that stuff. Well, the real leader of the Islamic world right now is in Damascus raising the black flag. So he's lost that temporarily anyway. But I do think that there is going to be a settlement. This settlement is going to be 99% what Netanyahu wants it to be. Read what the United States wants it to be. Britain wants it to be. And probably partially at least what Turkey wants it to be. And if Turkey gets some justice with regard to the Kurds and settles its own problems temporarily at least with the Kurds, then it'll be happy too. Now, If I were the Kurds, especially if I were the Kurds in possession of one of the better fighting forces in the region, the Peshmerga in northern Iraq, I think I'd be talking about unity. But they never can get together. The Iranian Kurds, the Syrian Kurds, the Iraqi Kurds, they never could get together. They had leaders that wanted to play each other off against one another. So if you had an Al Saladin come along, someone who could put if memory serves, Saladin was Kurdish. If you could find a leader like that who could put them together and create a formidable force, including a formidable military echelon to that force, then they could give some contest to what's happening, including to Israel. But I don't see that happening as long as the United States is behind Israel, because you're not fighting Israel, you're fighting the United States. That's where all these bombs are coming from. That's where all this death and destruction and bestiality is coming from, the empire. Look at the 864 strikes is what I heard a few minutes ago that they made in Syria. You think they got the factories to make those kind of bombs and everything? We're making all that stuff for them. We're giving them everything. We're giving them everything we have. And that's another worry I have, because if we went to war right now, I'm not sure we'd have a bean, let alone a bullet, because we've given it all to Israel, and we're continuing to give it all to Israel. But they're doing our business for us, just as Zelensky is in Ukraine. I don't think the Palestinians have a prayer. I hate to say that. I'm sad to say that, but I really don't think they have a prayer.
Larry, we have Muslim countries, and together with Iran and Turkey, which are not Muslim, which are not Arab. We have Arab countries and Muslim world. Iran and Turkey they're part of the Arab Muslim culture, but they're not part of the Arab world. But
nor the Persian.
Yeah, exactly. And how right now, whenever we're talking about the situation in Palestine, we're talking about Iran or Turkey. These Arab states are gone from the scene, and nobody's talking about anything. Where is the responsibility of these people? Because at the end of the day, there has to be some sort of concern on their part. Because if we want to get something for Palestinians, there has to be some sort of mutual understanding between Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, UAE. But it seems that with all that said, with what we've seen so far, we witnessed in Gaza, in Palestine, there is no unity, some sort of unity among them to find a solution that would be beneficial for Palestinians. Do you think that with the government, one of the main disagreement between Shia and Sunni was the situation in Syria? Right now, Bashar al-Assad is gone, and the government is in the hand of Sunni. And these people are a branch of Sunni Islam. How is that going to influence the mindset in the Arab countries? Are they going to still ignore the situation in Palestine? Or because we're hearing right now about Iran, Hezbollah, they're trying to do everything, but right now it's not about Iran and Hezbollah. What they're going to do about Palestine?
I think, and I've thought this for a long time and advised Powell this way when I was his chief of staff, that the brouhaha about the Sunni Shia split, about all the things that meant for our security policy and foreign policy, and the uproar over the clash of civilizations and so forth, was fine on the ground. And there were people in the bazaars, and there were people that felt that way, viscerally felt that way. There were Arabs who hated Persians and Persians who hated Arabs, and not at the top. Not at the top. At the top, in Riyadh, in the little Sparta, in Turkey and Ankara, they're interested in money. Money, commerce that produces that money, whether it's black commerce or white commerce, that's to say criminal. The criminal commerce in that region now is about $2.5 trillion annually. A lot of it coming out of Odessa. hmm One reason Putin doesn't want to take Odessa, he doesn't want to take on the mafia there. It's powerful, and it sticks together very, very well. These leaders, Mohammed bin Salman, Mohammed bin Zayed, all these leaders are interested in their future and their money. They're not interested in causes like the Palestinians or unifying Islam. They just aren't. The only people interested in that wear black and wave black flags. That's that's the truth. That's the reality. And those people who wave those black flags and have the various Al Nusra, Al Qaeda, uh, what is it, Hayat Tahrir al Sham, HTS, these groups, they're functionaries. When they want to use them, they use them. When they don't want to use them, they kill them. That's the simple facts. But the big guys at the top, only interested in money and the furtherance of their own interest, be damn the Palestinians.
Larry, how we had a terrorist attack in Russia. A senior Russian general was assassinated by Ukrainians. Where are we heading in Ukraine, in your opinion? And what was the necessity of doing this right now? It was just because of hatred? It has something strategic behind it?
This is a perfect example of what I've been saying till I'm blue in the face about who the Ukrainians really are. And I don't mean every Ukrainian out in the street and those brave young men and women who died in the trenches. I mean the Ukrainians who have made their way to power through largely the accumulation of money that the disintegration of the Soviet Union and the acceptance of that disintegration and welcoming of money into our banks created. That's what Ukraine is in reality. That's what Zelensky represents. This was an atrocious act at the peak of the empire's attempt to make bestiality the foreign policy of the world. And it made no sense whatsoever except to anger Putin and make him possibly, although I think he's too prudent to do this, I wouldn't blame him for doing it, come back viciously on Kyiv or some other place in Ukraine where he would have a really good chance of killing Zelensky. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the riposte. But here's the real kicker. This is Biden's attempt, Blinken and Sullivan's attempt, and their generals, the ones that are complacent with them, and the other people in NATO who are also complicit with them. This is their attempt to tie Donald Trump's hands so that he can't even come close to doing what he has, and everyone's wondering now if he would even do it, but what he promised to do in the election, which is to shut the Ukraine war down. They're trying to make it impossible for him. Putin comes back with some really heavy riposte. Trump's just apt to come out the next day and say, well, I'll teach Putin a lesson. Wait till I'm president. I think Putin knows the volatility of Trump, and I hope he'll be more circumspect about it. But remember what I said, maybe it wasn't to you, but I remember saying it on a number of talk shows or dialogue shows. We will regret killing a member of the Iranian government. Trump did it. He killed Soleimani. He was an official member of the Iranian government. We set that precedent. So, I mean, let's just face it. We are the vanguard in the world today of bestiality as a foreign and security policy. And who's to say that other people aren't going to pick the baton up and run with it? Zelensky just did. And I dare say a lot more will too, because it's a hell of a lot easier to assassinate your enemies than it is to go to war with them and defeat them.
Larry, do you think that Donald Trump would be able, but considering the current situation between Ukraine and Russia and the way that the Trump administration, these people who are going to work with Donald Trump are talking about the conflict, is he going to, after all, is he going to be able to make any sort of move as he has promised during 2024 presidential election? He said that he's going to put an end to the conflict in Ukraine in 24 hours. How is that going, in your opinion, with the current phase of the conflict?
Well, Donald Trump's also the one who said, I've got the oil. My troops are in Syria. I've got the oil. My troops have the oil. They're in Syria and they have the oil. I have the oil. I got the quote here somewhere. But your question is a good one. And even if Biden and Blinken and Sullivan and others try to tie his hands so badly that he can't get out, he's the type of person who would get out anyway. But here's my problem. Not only his volatility and his mercurial nature, but the fact of the people he's hiring to help him. I don't see these people helping him with this principal task that he's told the American people, and they voted for him in part because of, he's going to accomplish. I don't see them helping him. So am I wrong? Are they going to last not even 9 months? They're only going to last a week or two, and he's going to get rid of them and get some other people who will help him with this. Now, I might be wrong about Marco Rubio. I don't think I'm wrong about Hegseth, but I could be wrong about him if he does actually get in there and Trump turns to him and gives him an order to shut down the war in Ukraine any way that he possibly can. I think he'd probably give that to Rubio first and tell Hegseth to follow him up. That's the way it ought to happen anyway. And if that were to be the case, then those two might be helpmates for him. They might be helpmates for him. And he might get it done. And if he got it done swiftly and effectively, it would be a real boon to his follow-on years. But Donald Trump is just such a cipher. You don't know what he's going to do from 1 minute to the next.
Larry, you've mentioned the situation in Georgia and Romania. Is it going to be in the future in favor of Russia or in favor of the United States and Europeans?
Georgia's a real cipher right now too, because you've got the existing president Salome Zarabuchvili saying she's not leaving. You've got elections that happened, however squeakingly close, that were certified as fair and free by international observers. And so you're supposed to have a new government in there, and a government that is more balanced in its attitude. It wants to maintain a distance from Moscow and a distance from Europe, and just make the Caucasus a place people would like to visit and economically successful. So it does business with everyone, from China to the stands to Russia to Europe. You would think that the sanity of that position would prevail, but it was a very close election. And I think I would, if someone asked me, Nima, to bet if the current president is on the payroll of the CIA, I would bet yes. And if you asked me about certain newspaper editors in Tbilisi and others like that of influence, if they were on the pay of the CIA, I'd say yes. It looks to me a lot like Tehran in 1953. When Kermit Roosevelt was in there paying everybody he possibly could to say Mossadegh was, on the way out. He had to go. He had to go. Bring the Shah in and stuff. Much less sophisticated then. In 53, we hadn't learned how to do this bestiality bit as well as we do now. We do it with civilians. We do it with NGOs. We do it with velvet revolutions. We do it with banners in the street declaring we're looking for democracy. What we're looking for is another front to open against our arch enemy, Vladimir Putin. And Georgia worries me. If you remember back to 2007, 2008, my president saying Georgia would be a member of NATO, an invasion by Russia. There are some people who say that the threat to Russia, had it come on to Tbilisi, would have been so significant that there was no possibility of that. I differ with that. I say they would have made a lightning march on Tbilisi and Georgia would have been theirs overnight. And we'd have been sitting there whistling Dixie trying to bring, something in to help them. And that would happen again, I think, although Putin is beleaguered now, and we know that. So the more fronts we can open against him, the more beleaguered he's going to be. That's why he beat feet from Syria so fast. He knew, he's smart enough to know, I cannot maintain all these fronts. I can't. The empire has a lot of proxies, Israel being the prominent one in that region.
Larry, do you see the possibility of having these two conflicts not ended in Ukraine and in the Middle East, and even having a new conflict with China?
I see the possibility of the conflict extending in reality from Belarusia all the way to Chabahar and Bandar Abbas at the southern end of the Persian Gulf. I see that whole area being in refugee and diaspora turmoil, as well as real war at various points. And I see China getting very concerned about that, very concerned about it, because what you're doing in essence for China's strategy is you're putting up a massive firewall against the Base Road Initiative. It just comes to a screeching halt at a point where it doesn't want to come to a screeching halt. Now, they have several options. They could say the ASEAN China community, which is doing fine, thank you very much. You see many wars here. You see many problems here, other than maybe the Uyghurs and the Rohingya and one or two others, but you don't see any Ukraines, you don't see any Syrias, you don't see any collapsing, disintegrating states. What you see is vivid productivity, profit, commerce, trade, all taking place in what you might call China's already hegemonic region. And I hesitate even to use that term because their phrase ASEAN China community is really indicative of what it is. If you're familiar with ASEAN, they don't even believe in security parameters. It's all about commerce and trade. So China's got to take some action here at some place if it decides that that's indispensable territory for it to expand into in terms of trade and commerce. And I think that, you know, Xi Jinping's follow-on leader or the Politburo in general or whatever, they will probably come to that conclusion and they'll have to penetrate that wall somewhere. Now, they'll be aided majorly by the fact that I think Ukraine is going down big time. NATO is going down big time. Germany and France are the lead countries in political destabilization for NATO countries. I think the Scandinavian countries will be next. Mark my words. I was one of the few people saying this a few months ago about Germany, and it's destabilized completely right now, it looks like to me. We even have a chance here for a coalition with AfD to be a part of it. So I think China's going to find it easier to do than they might think right now, because I think the empire is going to have to withdraw to a certain extent because this chaos it's created is going to begin to turn inward and eat it itself.
Laurie, the situation in Syria, I think, is connected with China, Russia, Iran, and the United States in terms of what's going on with the new government in Syria. It's not a government, but because we have people from China, from Russia, and people who have some sort of enmity with against Iran, and Iran and the United States. Even I would argue that the United States and Iran were fighting ISIS together in Iraq, in Afghanistan. But how is that going to influence the future? Because as you've mentioned, it can be a source of mess for that region, and it's spreading all over the West Asia.
Especially when you consider that the United States,
all of these countries,
yeah, you consider that the United States had a major hand in creating ISIS in the first place. It's been a very handy tool, sometimes on our side and sometimes not on our side, but a very handy tool, as are a number of these terrorist groups, U.S. creations, British creations. But your point is a good one, and when I look at the tapestry of Iran and its relations with the outside world and the region right now, I see the Guardian Council, the Ayatollah, the new president, Zarif, all arguing about whether or not they go rapidly to a nuclear weapon right now. And I don't know how that argument's going to turn out. I don't necessarily believe Netanyahu, as busy as he is right now with all the territorial acquisition he's accomplishing, is going to catch this until it's a fait accompli. If that's the case, then it's a whole new ballgame. And then we've got to worry about an exchange of nuclear weapons between nuclear weapon states, namely Iran and Israel. If they make that decision, and I don't think they would have to go very long in implementing that decision. Now, whether or not what they create would be effectively married to a missile and deliverable in a devastatingly existential way on Israel. Remember, it's not a very big country. Is another matter altogether. But I have confidence that the Persians are capable of doing that. I had confidence that the Pakistanis were capable of doing that, and they did it. So, if that's a potential, then we're off to an entirely new power situation in the Middle East, which the United States' policy vis-a-vis Israel and using Israel to create chaos in the region will have created. And that brings us back to Rear Admiral Buchanan's remarks and his position as J5, I think, for the U.S. Strategic Command. What are we going to do when that happens? Are we going to nuke Iran? Are we going to attack Iran in a way that will eliminate its nuclear program? Are we indeed going to have a nuclear weapon used on us if we do that? These are all imponderables right now, but they are situations that could arise if Iran makes a decision and does it. And I have every confidence that the Iranians can do it if they make the decision. When we were looking at the AQ Khan network and the potential for Libya, Iran, ultimately North Korea, and other countries to master the technology, let's put it that way. And it's a number of phases. You have to master the actual plutonium or uranium-based bomb. You have to be able to reduce it in size to a point where it's transportable. Then you have to adapt it to a warhead so it's transportable. And then you have to make sure the missile is the missile you need to transport it. So it's all a very complicated process. It's just like you go, oh, nuclear bomb tomorrow morning. But I think the Iranians have been working on this all along in those various sectors. They just haven't put it all together. They make a decision to put it all together. It could be a matter of days that they put it all together. And then there would be a missile or two or three. We really missed on North Korea. I think we were saying 4 to 6, if I remember it there at first. And then all of a sudden we found out there were more like 20. And then there were 25. And then there were 50. Once you get it perfected, you can move out pretty rapidly if you have the sources of plutonium, uranium, or both in the case of North Korea. Reprocessing for plutonium and uranium and two different, I don't remember all that. I once knew all the detail or most of the details, but I don't remember them all. But they are very different and unique procedures. And a plutonium bomb is better than a uranium bomb in some respects, but it's more expensive. And we would be off to the races then. We're looking at entirely something many of us have been talking about all along. We should have sat down with the Saudis, with the Iranians, with the Israelis, with everyone, particularly the Israelis, when this movement was afoot to have a nuclear-free zone in Southwest Asia. We should have sat down and said, that's it, let's do it. Let's have a nuclear-free zone. And Israel, we're going to take you and twist your, until you do it, because we're going to have a nuclear-free zone. You're going to have to get rid of your nuclear weapons. Now, what I just said before about us using Israel rather than Israel using us would negate that possibility. And it probably did back there when we had a chance to do this, because we wanted Israel to have a nuclear weapon. After all, they're our bull terrier in the region. They do our killing for us. Even the bestial killing they're doing right now, they do it for us. Lindsey Graham is right when he says, if they weren't doing it, we'd be doing it.
How do you see the possibility of having a new agreement, nuclear agreement between the United States and Iran? And we know that the people who are going to work with Donald Trump are pro-Zionist, pro-Israel. They're not going to be happy, because Bibi is not happy with any sort of deal between Iran and the United States. But is Donald Trump capable of cutting a deal with Iran?
I think far more so than evil Joe Biden or any other Democrat I could imagine now, other than perhaps Barack Obama, who did, after all, craft the first one. a major diplomatic achievement that others were responsible for too. The Perm 5 plus Germany, Zarif, and a host of others. But could Trump do it? Yeah. Trump would be just the man to do it. It'd be kind of like a Nixon to China moment. Only that's a bad analogy because Trump said he would do it. He says he's the man who can do the deal. And wouldn't it be a triumphant victory? Sorry about the play on words for Donald Trump if he got a deal that was, quote, better than the JCPOA, unquote. He would love that. He would love that. And I think he would throw that in Netanyahu's face. To hell with Netanyahu. Trump is the one person I can think of who, from the executive office, might tell Bibi to go to hell because it was against his ego not to. He might be the person. But so many things would have to come together there. You know, the Iranians would have to give quite a bit, I think. It would have to be a deal that wasn't foreclosed in 25 years. It'd have to be a deal in perpetuity, I think. And any violations reported by the IAEA or whatever would be a deal killer. But it would also have to be on the other side, complete lift of sanctions. I think that would have to be it. And Trump would have to say, yes, sanctions will be lifted completely. Then the remainders of the bureaucracy might be really angry with him. So it would take a really Herculean effort for Trump to do it. But I could see him doing it. And I could see the Iranians going along with it. The position they're in right now would more or less, I think, influence that positively, that they would be more willing to do it now because they've sort of been a bit isolated now.
I do believe that whatever deal he can make with Iran, he can cut with Iran. After all, he doesn't need to make a better deal because after all, he's gonna make it in public as a because it's beautiful. It's the best deal ever.
I could actually see him delighting in having a press conference or a dual press conference with Bibi Netanyahu in Jerusalem or in Washington and looking at him and saying, it's a good deal, Bibi, accept it. I negotiated it, Bibi, accept it. I couldn't see Joe Biden saying that. Not on your life.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Sure. Great pleasure, as always.
Take care.
Take care.